Hey guys, Budcat7 here. Okay, it is Thursday, September 30th, 2021, and I'd like to thank you for visiting the Stonewall Research channel here on YouTube. I really do appreciate it. Alright, guys, well, in this video, I'd like to cover some recent findings by researchers out in New Mexico that have to do with these ancient footprints that have been found there that date back some 23,000 years. And this is a big revelatory thing to the scientific community of archaeologists and anthropologists because they really never thought it would go that far back. And as I've said many times on this channel and many of the videos where I've covered accounts of the giants or many other things, that they're going to be pushing these timelines further and further back. And even though they still sort of write about these things with this quote unquote new quote unquote world bias, which is sort of inherent in the language that's used in many of these articles that are done by it. But, you'd see the key words in there that represent this bias. But, like the arrival of people, pushing back the arrival of people here in the quote unquote new world, which is baloney because, there's no reason. If you keep pushing the timeline back further and further, which with new information and new findings, or re examination of old ones in this case, that there's no reason to believe that it shouldn't go even further back. And as I've covered on this channel from people like Charles C. Mann in his book 1491, Revelations of the Americas Before the Arrival of Columbus, I covered this book on my channel, many of the chapters from this book. So, and, it's just what our notions of what history really is and how far back habitation here in Americas goes is a bit of a controversy, as Charles C. Mann revealed in his book. As many of these researchers in South America say some of these organized civilizations go back some 30,000 years, potentially some even 40,000 years. So, and of course, they're not, these views aren't accepted by the mainstream, real hardcore academics, despite the fact that they're doing all this new research. And, it doesn't matter, they're going to stick to their guns. But, this sort of blows it wide open and raises these questions up again. And it should be, that way because, again, with the arrival of peoples into the Americas, well, it's supposed that they were already here some 23,000 years ago and before that. And the reason why I'm saying that as well is because a lot of research from New Mexico, where this is coming from, has been controversial over the years. And I've covered on the channel from Cito Sharam's book, The First American, okay, where he wanted to tell us about it and he thought it shouldn't be suppressed, was this research by Frank C. Hibben, okay, who's a controversial character in anthropology and archaeology, and more or less drummed out of the business because he had some theories about, what had archaeology and anthropology there in New Mexico, and they more or less, blackballed this guy, and they didn't quite ruin him. He wasn't crushed by the criticism or anything like that. He kept on working, but I mean, this should go to sort of clear this guy's name. He didn't deserve to be treated like that, and he's probably right, judging by this new research here, or at least reconsideration of these finds. So I covered Frank C. Hibben's work through C.W. Saran's book, The First American, on his channel, and C.W. Saran talked about Frank C. Hibbin and his work and thought it was being suppressed and shouldn't be. And he actually did his dissertation at Harvard to become a doctor in anthropology, graduated from Harvard, about the Galena people, who were a people of a different phenotype. Okay, as I covered from a newer article from the 2000s from the University of Washington State, I believe, researchers who talked about a genocide going on there and what Frank C. Hibbin revealed about it. And this is part of why they wanted to, sort of just get rid of this guy, but they really couldn't, even though they just dismissed all of his work. And to this day, Galena Canyon, here you can see some of the constructions here by the Galena people who were, murdered, completely wiped out, 100%. By some people, it may have been the ancestors of the quote unquote peaceful Pueblo, who may not have been so peaceful in the past. Okay. And they wiped out these people who were larger in stature and had strange skull types. Okay. And, committed this sort of atrocity and, like tortured these people, like the way the new researchers found out, and they asked this question as well, why these people were genocided. And they were very sophisticated, yet, they were probably called cannibals and everything else by these other people who killed them all. But they were very sophisticated people who lived in these very well constructed towers called torreons, and it doesn't seem to be many of them existing today because the site was never named a national historical site by the government, so it was just left to whoever wants to go over there and do whatever they want, including, I think, maybe the military might have used it for target practice there, because none of these things have seemed to have survived. Yet when they were found, they seemed to be intact. And when Frank C. Hibbin did his research there, but yet none of them seem to be intact today. And it's still not a national park or historical site. But places like Hovenweep and the Salmon Ruins, which are, in the same sort of geographical area over there, are attributed to different peoples and not like these Galena people. And a whole different story was going on there. And it's, for some reason, they decided to suppress it and bury it. Okay, so the Frank C. Hibbin also did this work at Sandia Cave. Okay, so I'll read from it here, and you see what we're talking about. The primary source of controversies was Hibbin's claim to have found a deposit with pre-Clovis artifacts, including projectile points, which he termed Sandia points. They were very different than the Clovis type points, in Sandia Cave in the Sandia Mountains near Albuquerque, New Mexico. Hibbin believed the layers to be about 25,000 years old, much older than the Paleo-Indian cultures previously documented in the U.S. Southwest. The layers also included the bones of Pleistocene species such as camels, mastodons, and horses. Okay, so that's where camels and horses come from, folks, from the Americas at, free age, 25,000 year age here, but who knows? They're not sure. And so, in any case, he was criticized for this and actually accused of committing a hoax by planting the artifacts in the cave and everything. So, because they just refused to believe it. This is during the time where Alice Herdlischka was the curator for the Bureau of Ethnology for the Smithsonian. And, he believed that there couldn't have been any humans here in the Americas prior to about 4 or 5 thousand years ago, and he stuck to it despite the fact that newer finds were being made 7,000 years ago, 8,000 years ago. But he refused to acknowledge all of those things. It doesn't matter who did what research, and Frank C. Hibbins' work, which is probably 100% accurate if we to believe the new research. It's certainly plausible, and would sort of you know give Frank C. Hibbin back his credentials, as being a researcher of some merit, because he really did extensive archaeology, and it was just dismissed because they refused to believe any sort of thing that might habitation of humans here in the Americas prior to the Ice Age. So they're changing their minds now, and they're going to have to, because it's in their face, and there's no reason to believe why it shouldn't go even further back. So this article is from the New York Times. This was just released maybe a week ago or so. We'll read the article and talk about it a little bit, but ancient footprints push back date of human arrival in the Americas. Human footprints found in New Mexico are about 23,000 years old, a study reported, suggesting that people may have arrived long before the Ice Age's glaciers melted. And, I've mentioned on this channel before about some Native Americans who don't believe they came from anywhere. They came from this soil here. They didn't come from Asia or across the Bering Straits. That's what they believe, okay? They're not going with that story, okay? And there was never any proof for it, okay? And they still can't find any proof according to the Smithsonian, which I read from this article. So this is from January 2020. Okay, the Smithsonian has given up on that Bering Strait crossing theory. That's done. No more. Okay, everything you learned in school, just like me, about the Bering Strait is all wrong. All right, they had to admit it because they could never find the animals or people crossing at a time that they thought, no matter where they did archaeology. Okay, so now they believe they all came by boat. And every researcher and every journalist that's, focusing on this should know this when they write their articles and everything. So, look, if you could go back 23,000 years, it's no big jump to assume that it could be even older. There could be evidence of even older civilizations and organized societies existing in the Americas, which is what I covered in Charles C. Mann's book. Okay, he went directly to the archaeologists there in South America, and they're talking about 30,000 years, 40,000 years, and it's going to keep going further and further back. You're opening a can of worms, but they had no choice because they found something out about this when they looked at it, when they did another reevaluation of the footprint. So, fossilized human footprints at White Sands National Park program manager first discovered. Okay, here's the first ones that he discovered. Okay. Ancient human footprints preserved in the ground across the White Sands National Park in New Mexico are astonishingly old. Scientists reported on Thursday, and this is from September 23rd, 2021, dating back about 23,000 years to the Ice Age. The results, if they hold up to scrutiny, would rejuvenate the scientific debate about how humans first spread across the Americas, implying that they did so at a time when massive glaciers covered much of their path. Okay, so let's say maybe ancient glaciers didn't cover their path because the Ice Age is a baloney theory. Okay, by a guy named Louis Agassiz, all right, from the 1800s, all right, when he presented his theory, the Ice Age theory. It's not just the Ice Age, even though they say Ice Age all the time. It's a theory, okay? In 1837, Agassiz proposed that the Earth had been subjected to a past ice age. He presented the theory to the Helvetic Society that ancient glaciers flowed outward from the Alps, okay, a mile thick or whatever it is. But people like Immanuel Velikovsky, right, Worlds in Collision, and people like William Corliss, based on scientific evidence, okay, said that it would be impossible for such an ice age to occur to the extent that they said it was. All right. Because some of the things defy the laws of physics, and the geologists forgot to check with the physicists about how ice acts on hard stone like granite. Okay, with granite having a hardness 6.5 on the Mohs scale, and ice having like less than 1 in hardness. No matter how thick it is, it's still just as hard, you see. So, in any case, these guys here said, no ice age. It's a baloney story. So, whenever they mention ice age, they're not talking about, just don't know what they're talking about. Something else occurred that screwed with the weather, and they assume it was something like an ice age because there's rock all over the place and stone all over the place that shouldn't be there. And in their opinion, it was moved by icebergs. But in Velikovsky's opinion, it was moved by interplanetary electrical discharge and geoengineering resulting from that. Natural geoengineering. Researchers who have argued for such an early arrival hailed the new study as firm proof. I think this is probably the biggest discovery about the peopling of America in 100 years, said Cyprian Ardelian, an archaeologist at Autonomous University at Zacatecas in Mexico, who is not involved in the work. I don't know what gods they prayed to, but this is a dream find. For decades, many archaeologists have maintained that humans spread across North and South America only at the end of the last ice age. They pointed to the oldest known tools, including spear tips, scrapers, and needles, dating back about 13,000 years. The technology was known as Clovis, named for the town of Clovis, New Mexico, where some of these first instruments came to light. However, Frank C. Hibben found these older ones around a time, just a couple thousand years before these footprints, so-called footprints, hail from, right, some 23,000 years ago. So, nobody takes it into account because Frank C. Hibben's work was buried, despite the fact that he did extensive archaeology and quite good archaeology at these sites, and nobody knows anything about his work because they buried it. They don't like that guy for a couple of reasons: how far back human habitation goes, and that the people like Galena Canyon were genocided by native peoples here in the Americas who are, got to think about it. The age of the Clovis tools lined up neatly with the retreat of the glaciers. That alignment bolstered a scenario in which Siberian hunter-gatherers moved into Alaska during the Ice Age, where they lived for generations until ice-free corridors opened and allowed them to expand southward. But starting in the 1970s, some archaeologists began publishing older evidence of humanity's presence in North America. Last year, Dr. Odilian and his colleagues published a report of stone tools in a mountain cave in Mexico dating back 26,000 years, like Frank C. Hibbins. So maybe, maybe Frank C. Hibbins' reputation can be restored, and maybe he wasn't so off base with his conclusions of 25,000 years old and Sandy a man at all. You know, maybe that they start taking that all more seriously, and get uh, you know these landmarks as serious archaeological finds. Other experts have been skeptical of such ancient finds. Ben Potter, an archaeologist at the Arctic Studies Center at Liaocheng University in China, said that some of these supposed tools might be actually be oddly shaped rocks. Dr. Potter also questioned some of the dates scientists have assigned to their finds. If a tool sinks into an underlying sediment, for example, it may appear to be older than it really is. There are unresolved issues with every single one of them, Dr. Potter said of the older purported sites. None of them are unequivocal. The study of Dwight Stands now adds a new line of evidence for an early arrival. Instead of tools, the researchers have found footprints. The footprints were first discovered in 2009 by David Bustos, the Parks Resource Program Manager. Over the years, he has brought in an international team of scientists to help make sense of the finds. Together, they have found thousands of human footprints across 80,000 acres of the park. One path was made by someone walking in a straight line for a mile and a half. Another shows a mother setting her baby down on the ground. Other tracks were made by children, or possibly little people, like Cabeza de Vaca talked about in his travels through Lower Americas in the early 1500s, when he was shipwrecked with two other guys, and they ran into little Stone Age people, tiny Stone Age people, and also giants. And he was a hero. He went back to Spain and said that the conquistadors were, savages, wantonly killing people. Some 14 million to 19 million people died at the hands of the conquistadors, their heroes. You know, they're their heroes, and also the people who killed 14 million to 19 million. It's hard to be people from a part of the world that were conquered by another people, and now you're a combination of the two. Who do who you going with? It's pretty messed up. Just things that we shouldn't have done in the past. So they're excavating some footprints here that they followed into lower sediment from the surface sediment. The children tend to be more energetic, said Sally Reynolds, a paleontologist at Bournemouth University in England and a co-author of the new study. They're a lot more playful, jumping up and down. Okay, this is some writing here and comments. Matthew Stewart, a zooarchaeologist at the Max Planck Institute for Chemical Ecology in Jena, Germany, who is not involved in the study, said that the evidence that humans had left the footprints was unequivocal. The footprints were formed when people strolled over damp, sandy ground on the margin of a lake. Later, sediments gently filled in the prints and the ground hardened, but subsequent erosion resurfaced the prints. In some cases, the impressions are only visible when the ground is unusually wet or dry. Otherwise, they are invisible to the naked eye. But ground penetrating radar can reveal their three dimensional structure, including the heels and toes. What is fascinating about the study of footprints is that they present snapshots in time, Dr. Stewart said. The work of determining the age of the prints fell to Jeffrey Pagati and Kathleen Springer, two research geologists at the United States Geological Survey. In 2019, they went to White Sands to get a feel for the site. Walking around some of the footprints, the researchers sometimes came across ancient seeds of ditch grass that had grown by the lake. In some spots, the abundant seeds formed thick blankets. The researchers brought some of the seeds back to their lab and measured the carbon in them to determine their age. The result came as a shock. The ditch grass had grown thousands of years before the end of the last ice age. And again, who knows about carbon dating, but this is what they're coming up with themselves. Okay. Uh, you know, I have a feeling they mess with that whenever it suits their needs, and they just apply, the plus or minus error ratio there whenever it applies to whatever they want to talk about. Dr. Pagati and Ms. Springer knew those numbers would be controversial, so they embarked on a far more ambitious study. The darts are going to start flying, so we better be ready for them, Dr. Pagati recalled. The scientists dug a trench near one cluster of human and animal footprints to get a tighter estimate of their age. On the side of the trench, they could see layer after layer of sediment. Carefully mapping the surrounding ground, they were able to trace the footprints of humans and animals to 6 layers in the trench, interspersed with 11 seed beds. The researchers collected the ditch grass seeds from each bed and measured their carbon. These measurements confirmed the initial results. The oldest footprints at the site, left by an adult human and a mammoth, were located below a seedbed dating back about 22,800 years. In other words, the people who left the footprints walked around White Sands about 10,000 years before the Clovis people. The youngest footprints, the researchers estimated, dated to about 21,130 years ago. That meant that people lived or regularly visited the lake for about 2,000 years. And there's some of the seeds, ditch grass seeds, with the footprints. This is a bombshell, said Ruth Grun, an archaeologist at the University of Alberta who is not involved in the study. On the face of it, it's very hard to disprove. Dr. Potter praised the White Sands team for their care in the new study, saying that it is the strongest case yet made for people in the Americas before 16,000 years ago. But he would feel more confident in the extraordinary age of the prints, he said, if there were other lines of evidence beyond the ditch grass seeds. The seeds could have absorbed older carbon from the lake water, making them seem older than they really are. I'd like to see stronger data, and I don't know if it's possible to get stronger data from this particular site, he said. If it's true, then it really has some profound implications. If humans were well established in New Mexico 23,000 years ago, they must have started spreading down from Alaska long before that. That starts to wind back the clock, said Dr. Reynolds of Bournemouth University. Some researchers have argued that people could have spread through the Americas even when the glaciers were at their peak. Instead of traveling down the mainland, mainland, they could have moved along the coast. Alternatively, Dr. Artelian and his colleagues have proposed that people traveled inland more than 32,000 years ago before Ice Age glaciers reached their maximum extent and blocked off that route. Well, it's never blocked off. And the guys, the journalists here, or any of these guys, should pay more attention to, you know, the Smithsonian research there, which I find it hard to believe that they haven't, or maybe they just forgot or something like that. Where their research, which is key research in in the Americas, really like at the top apex of research. Well, they say they all came by boat, and if they came by boat back then, they came at any time in the past, any time, way before the Ice Age, way, way, way before the Ice Age. Okay, it's not the New World. That's a bias, an undeserved bias based on very superficial knowledge, archaeological and anthropological knowledge in the Americas. Okay, because you see this, that's why. Okay, all this could have been looked at a long time ago. You heard the find goes back to I heard it goes back to even the 1970s. Dr. Goon argued that both scenarios remain possible in light of the new evidence from White Sands. It would take more work to find earlier sites that favored one of them over the other. We've got a lot to do, she said. Mr. Bustos and his colleagues have more investigations planned at White Sands. They want to learn about the behavior of the people who left their footprints there. Did they hunt the animals around them? Did they live permanently at the lake or just pay it visits? I bet you they were eating a lot of stuff out of that lake and not so much the animals on the land there, only for specific and extremely, important reasons. They must work quickly. The erosion that has revealed the footprints will erase them from the landscape in a matter of months or years. Countless footprints are disappearing before the scientists even lay eyes on them. That's right, they got to get to work. It's kind of heartbreaking, Mr. Busto said. We're racing to try to document what we can. Yeah, get busy. And I guess that's the end of the article there. Yes, you often hear about these things like the research done there at Galena Canyon, Frank C. Hibbins' work, but then later by the University of Washington State University there. And, you know, whatever happened to it, they plan to do more research there. Did they? I mean, Frank C. Hibbins did extensive research there. Maybe he could bring back his work and take his work seriously now that you found this. Okay, so they have to reconsider how far back. You heard what they said. If they're finding this and dating it to 23,000 years ago, that means they came there way long before that. Okay, and maybe nobody came here because we don't know where the true origin of hominid beings that walked and talked and thought and had civilizations in the past. Okay, they're not prepared to go there. This is why they did what they did to Frank C. Hibbins. Okay, according to C.W. Saram, who's trying to tell us about archaeology in the Americas and how it was being suppressed. Okay, that's this guy right here. He's saying this back in the 1970s that archaeology was being suppressed in the Americas. Okay, and if anybody would know a BS story that somebody was putting out, it would be him, okay? Because he worked for the Ministry of Propaganda for the Nazis, all right? He knew a BS story when he heard one, okay? Here he is lighting up, all right? And William Corliss was just a super genius, smart guy, okay, who worked for the government and wrote a lot of scientific pamphlets about different government research projects and nuclear stuff and whatever for the government there. And he just, when he retired, he decided to tell the truth about stuff. You see the books he wrote here about mysteries and puzzling artifacts and ancient structures and everything. And he said, what are these things? They have nothing to do with history of human beings as we know it. What is going on here? Biological anomalies in humans, weird things like gills, people born with gills, very strange stuff. But in any case, guys, that was the article here. So, like I've been saying on my channel for a very long time, is that they keep pushing the date of human habitation in America further and further and further back. Okay, and here's just another one of these sites where it's confirming these ideas. Okay, so they have to start reconsidering things based on this alone. And also, in tandem with the Smithsonian research that said that people weren't coming across the land bridge now. How that figures for the animals that went back and forth, I haven't quite figured out yet, but they say that the people came by boat. How the animals got here, well, they always have to have people coming into America because they don't have evidence of any sort of hominids being here. But there is, as we know from Michael Cremo, there's evidence of this, but they're never going to acknowledge it. But here they had no choice. Had no choice. So this opens up a whole can of worms, and people on that side of the argument that are on the inside are going to be pushing more for that. And that's good for anybody interested in the truth and what the real history of the Americas is, and not this fantasy story that we're given based on, very, very weak research in the Americas. Okay, so in any case, guys, I needed to talk about this article because it related to so much of the research that I've done on my channel. So it's important to know these things. And again, I've said it again and again and again on my channel. You're going to see this in the future. They're going to keep on pushing further and further back in time to the point where it's just not going to be any notion of the new world anymore. And there's no such thing. Okay, and it could be even conceivably much older than what we would consider the old world. Okay, as I say again and again, culture disseminated from the Americas like the camel and the horse, which figure heavily into, civilizations and how they operate in the past, critical to their function. All right, travel and everything else, and work animals, etc. So, any case, guys, please do hit the like button if you like the video, and please do subscribe because we talk about these ideas that are radical on the channel. But as you can see, the mainstream has to give up sometime based on just the evidence that stares them in the face, and they have no explanations for it, just made up ones. Alright, guys. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. Please do hit the like button, and please do subscribe if you're not a subscriber. And Budcat7 signing out. Peace.